Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.
Waggy Kraken?
I'm in favor.
Let's do it.
Anthony, we're good on your go.
All right. Well, hello and welcome to this debate for the 95th District in the Wisconsin State Assembly. My name is Anthony Chergosky, and I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Public Administration at the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. Thank you for joining us today. I'd like to thank the many sponsors and supporters of this debate. These sponsors include WKBT News 8 Now, WXOW News 19, the La Crosse Tribune, Wisconsin Public Radio, WIZM Radio, Midwest Family La Crosse, the La Crosse Area Chamber of Commerce, Leader Ethics Wisconsin, the League of Women Voters of the La Crosse area, and the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. Thank you to all of these sponsors for their incredible support. I would also like to thank retired UW-La Crosse political science professor Joe Heim for his amazing contributions in making these debates such an important and valuable tradition in Western Wisconsin. The candidates for the 95th Assembly District are Representative Joe Billings and Jerome Gunderson. Billings is the Democratic Party candidate and was first elected to the Wisconsin State Assembly in 2011. Gunderson is the Republican Party candidate in this race. The format for this debate is as follows. Each candidate will receive 1 minute for an opening statement. Then the members of our media panel will take turns asking questions of the candidates. When a question is asked, a candidate will have 1 minute and 15 seconds to respond. After that, the other candidate will have 45 seconds for rebuttal. We will conclude the debate with closing statements by each candidate. Our media panel for today features Isabella Hulsizer from WKBT News 8 Now, Marcus Arsvald from WXOW News 19, Bob Heiss from the La Crosse Tribune, and Brad Williams from WIZM Radio. The League of Women Voters of the La Crosse area is generously providing assistance with keeping track of speaking time. Thank you, Chris Haskell, for providing this assistance. I asked the candidates to refrain from interrupting one another, and I asked the candidates to respect the time limits for their responses. I will reinforce time cues as needed during the debate. Through a coin flip, we have determined that Representative Billings will go first. Representative Billings, you have 1 minute for your opening statement.
Thank you. It's nice to be here today, talking with all of you and people in my district. I moved to La Crosse several decades ago, thinking that I was going to move on to Madison or Minneapolis, a bigger city, and fell in love with La Crosse and raised my kids here. I started working at the friendship program at Christ Episcopal Church teaching English as a second language and citizenship to among adults, and worked my way out of my job as my students went on to get jobs in the community and go to Western. Since then, I was elected to the county board and now the state assembly. I appreciate my job working for you, and I never take it for granted. I'm a person who has the right work ethic, temperament, and experience to be a good state representative, and I think I have been the last 9 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Billings. Mr. Gunderson, you have 1 minute for your opening statement.
Thank you, Anthony, and thank you all for hosting this event. My name is Jerome Gunderson. I'm the challenger in the 95th Assembly District. I think that voters deserve a diversity of ideas, and opposition is really the key to the democratic process, so that's why I'm running. I personally am from a large family of physicians here in La Crosse. I'm a builder by trade. I've been fortunate to be able to pick my projects at this point in my life, and I love doing community-oriented projects. I've spent 14 years on the Rotary Lights Steering Committee, building a lot of the displays that you see at Christmas time down at the park, where we supply food for all the food banks in Western Wisconsin. Most recently, I've been fortunate to spend the last year of my life building the Riverside Park band shell. That was a project conceived by the Band Shell Consortium, Moon Tunes, Concert Band, Jazz Orchestra, Rotary Lights. They raised almost $1 million, and I was fortunate to be the fabricator and installer of the band shell. Very proud of that and happy to be involved with so many giving people in the community. I'd like to take the principles I've learned from building to Madison, to do things on time, under budget, and at a high quality. I'm asking for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gunderson. We now turn to our media panel. We have a question for Representative Billings from Isabella Hulsizer of WKBT News 8 Now. Isabella, over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon to both of you and to everyone else on the panel. So Wisconsin is undeniably a hotspot for COVID-19, and Governor Evers has said that he wants to follow the science, and he put in a mask mandate, and he routinely wears a mask to lead by example. So our state leadership somewhat appears to be in direct opposition to our federal leadership. President Trump and his staff do not wear masks all that often and have criticized or made fun of those who do wear one. The president then himself became sick with COVID, which makes me ask the two of you, which mask philosophy do you follow between our state and federal leadership, and which one would you encourage your voters to follow?
Representative Billings, you have 1 minute and 15 seconds.
I do not follow the lead of President Trump on this. I follow the lead of Governor Evers, and I listen into his press conferences, which are like night and day from what we've seen on the federal level. Things are guided by science. We always get the numbers from the secretary and Dr. Westergaard, and Governor Evers gives us updates that are important to us. And press is treated respectfully. They get one question, and the press treats the governor respectfully. They're all adults in the room, and that's what I like to see. I think COVID is hard. And I think we're all doing the best we can. And I think we need to be kind to each other. I think that most of us are wearing masks. Most of us are practicing social distancing. Most of us are washing our hands. I think that we are. I was on a call with Mayo, and there's a doctor there who I think is a hero. He went to New York when they had a shortage of doctors who could work during their COVID hotspot. I think he said it best when he said, I don't know why wearing masks has become an issue of freedom when it should be an issue of love thy neighbor. I agree with him on that.
Mr. Gunderson, 45 seconds.
I wear a mask on a daily basis. I respect the request that we all wear masks. I want people to understand, though, that masks are not a force shield of invisibility. We don't stop COVID with a mask. We stop COVID by appropriate distance. I think there's been conflicting reports. At first, Dr. Fauci on the national level said masks weren't required. Then, of course, he said that masks are. So there has been some confusion, but the best way to avoid spreading COVID, I think everyone knows, along with washing hands, wearing a mask when it's appropriate, keep your distance from folks. If we keep a 6-foot distance, an arm's length from everyone, we will not have much of a chance of getting this disease that's passed through our respiratory system. So I would encourage everyone, wear your mask when you are around people at a close distance, but please keep your distance from other people to prevent the spread. I think that's the biggest problem. The spike in our spread is clearly due to college students coming back to school after being sequestered for a year.
Thank you, Mr. Gunderson. Thank you. Next on our media panel, we have a question for Mr. Gunderson from Marcus Arsvald of WXOW News 19. Marcus, over to you.
Hello, everyone. My first question, political divisiveness is happening right here in La Crosse. I would like a response from you both on what your thoughts are on a local religious leader saying that you cannot be a Catholic and be a Democrat.
Mr. Gunderson, you have 1 minute 15.
Well, I think there are extreme ideas on all sides of the religious and political spectrum. But of course, you can be a Catholic and a Democrat. I think that it's important to realize that there are principles that the Catholic Church abides by. And I think that the hard letter of the law is being followed by this particular priest. But I think that forgiveness is something that is preached in the church. And I think that there's really no judgment that he can pass on each individual. It's up to ourselves to be personally responsible. And we have to be responsible for our values and be true to ourselves. So I think that it's most important to look inside yourself and find out how you feel about the issues of the day. And I think that personal responsibility overrules judgment by whether it's a church or mandates from a state. I think that we have to look at what is right and what is wrong and follow our hearts.
Thank you, Mr. Gunderson. Representative Billings, you have 45 seconds.
Yeah, when I read those comments, I was very disheartened. I think that's just more the divisiveness that we do not need. I felt bad for my friends who are Catholic and had really interesting discussions with them about what you do when a leader in your faith says comments like that were so difficult for me to understand and accept. I go to English Lutheran Church, and we do something called community conversations at noon where people from all faiths are invited, and we discuss issues that can be sometimes difficult to discuss in a way where everybody is listened to, everybody is respected, and you even get a little lunch if you, and there's a free will offering. I mean, that's the way churches should be. I really love my church and my church community. And that divisiveness is really not where we need to be right now.
Thank you, Representative Billings. Next on our media panel, we have a question for Representative Billings from Bob Heiss of the La Crosse Tribune. Bob, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Good to meet you. I hope you can hear me through this. Wisconsin is divided, and there's a reason to believe not much is getting done. How can you work across the aisle and get things done with the Republicans or the Democrats and the governor? Give us a couple examples of how you can get things done.
Representative Billings, you have 1 minute and 15 seconds.
All right, I'm going to take a moment to welcome you to La Crosse, Bob, and thanks for being part of this. And I hope you continue going forward. So that's a great question. I, from day one, have behaved in a way where I've worked across the aisle. I have a history on La Crosse County Board where you might be fighting with someone one day, but you might be in agreement the next day on an issue. So you have to have a discussion, but be able to go out for a cup of coffee afterwards. That's my belief. And so I worked hard when I got elected to knock on doors of both Republicans and Democrats in the Capitol and get to know people. And that's held me in good stead. Recently, I was honored by the Wisconsin Economic Development Association for work on an opportunity zone bill that I worked with Nancy Vandermeer on the other side of the aisle to get that through, because we know she's from Western Wisconsin, as am I, and we need to work together to get things done for our district. John Nygren, up in the opposite corner of the state from me, is a friend of mine who I've worked on a lot of issues with, including our heroin and opioid epidemic. And he and I think, are an example of how we can do things well in Madison.
Thank you, Representative Billings. Mr. Gunderson, you have 45 seconds.
Well, I think it's unfortunate when politics rules instead of common sense and community. 4 years on the county board has shown me that despite the fact I'm in the minority, we can still work together and accomplish things at the governmental decision-making process. I think that it's unfortunate that our governor has chosen the path of strict mandates and non-communication with the majority. And it's unfortunate that some of his behavior has been deemed unlawful by the Supreme Court. And I think that that's really a non-starter, and it shows why there's been so little productivity at the state legislation level. And it's really sad to see that it's a politics game instead of caring for the people and really coming together with progress, like finding ways to reopen schools and reopen businesses. It's also terrible that the unintended consequence of opioid death has skyrocketed during this COVID. So it's a lot of problems.
Thank you, Mr. Gunderson. Next on our media panel, we have a question for Mr. Gunderson from Brad Williams of WIZM Radio. Brad, over to you.
Thank you, and thank you to both of the candidates for being part of this today. We have heard a lot in maybe not necessarily the 95th district, but other districts about Western Wisconsin maybe being on the short end of the stick and having to wait for things as opposed to Madison and Milwaukee, the more populous areas of the state, getting preference. What would you suggest, or what would you try to pursue as a way to get more attention to the Coulee region, the 95th district, in the next couple of years?
Well, thank you, Brad. And this is kind of appropriate that we're just hearing you and not seeing you. It goes along with every day.
I am in radio, yes.
I like that. It's comforting. Yeah, I think that Western Wisconsin does get overlooked. I think that in the recovery process ahead of us, there probably will be a lot of infrastructure improvement, and Wisconsin can certainly use that. I mean, Western Wisconsin, La Crosse area specifically, we've had unique problems at the county level with road repair throughout our county. And in the city of La Crosse, I think everyone knows the legendary condition of La Crosse Street and certain streets that are jointly city repaired and state funded. So I think it's important to know that during the race that Governor Evers won, there was a $90 million line item for road repair. And Governor Evers vetoed with line item veto most of that, pared it down to 75 million, and then spent most of that on DOT grants to Madison for mass transit. Now that's unfortunately mass transit that can't be used because of COVID right now. So I think that we have to really watch where the dollars flow and make sure that in this rebuilding process, we will have the opportunity to get fully funded for road repairs. And I'll look into why we can't get La Crosse Street paved.
Thank you, Mr. Gunderson. Representative Billings, you have 45 seconds.
To get more attention to Western Wisconsin, I think one thing that I've done that's been very effective is, as I'm part of organizations in Madison, I bring those people to La Crosse and to Western Wisconsin. For example, I'm the co-chair of the bipartisan bicameral Children's Caucus. And so we've had Children's Caucus meetings right here in La Crosse. So people in the Capitol can hear about what we're experiencing right here in La Crosse. I've done the same thing with the heroin and opioid task force and other task forces I've been on. I've been able to pull the Madison here to La Crosse to hear what we have to say. The other thing I do is keep strong contact with people in La Crosse and bring them to the Capitol and get them within earshot of people who are making decisions there. That's worked with Prairie Springs 2 building. That's worked with our Chamber of Commerce, working to back up what I've been working on those issues.
Thank you, Representative Billings. Next up, we go back to Isabella Hulsizer from WKBT News 8 Now with a question for Representative Billings. Isabella, over to you.
Thank you. With the governor's new emergency order that limits capacity, we've heard some smaller business owners are struggling, and they're even worried now that they'll struggle some more. So what recommendations would you make to those local business owners to survive with limited capacity?
Yes, along with the governor's mask order, extending the mask order, he also included that provision for businesses because clearly we were in a crucial point in Wisconsin where our numbers are rising, our death numbers are rising, and our hospitals in some of our regions and healthcare facilities are at capacity. So he opened the center in West Allis to help deal with people who, if we don't have room in hospitals, but also he included $100 million packages for businesses. I was so happy to see that and advocating for that, geared mainly toward restaurants, towards bars, nail salons, the people who are going to be hurt most. As a ranking member on tourism, I'm in tight contact with a lot of those small businesses and our Convention and Visitors Bureau here in La Crosse. And so I know the situation. I know what they're facing. I've talked to business owners who say, I don't know if I can make it past the new year. And so I was happy that that extra infusion of cash came in. We need to make sure that we work to help our businesses make it through this time.
Thank you, Representative Billings. Mr. Gunderson, you have 45 seconds.
We're not about to lose businesses. We are losing them on a daily basis. This is a crisis, and this is a crisis that I think it's unconscionable that Governor Evers has shut down businesses, that some people are deemed essential workers and others are not. That is a designation by a state government that's overbearing. And there is a way that people can, through separation, through actual personal responsibility, keep businesses open. It's been shown throughout the world that people queue up and go in line one at a time to stores to keep the stores open. But we're losing stores, we're losing our downtown businesses that we've worked so hard to keep. And it's really the fault of the governor for his illegal, being ruled against by the state Supreme Court, his illegal mandates. We've got to stop them, we've got to get people back to work.
Thank you, Mr. Gunderson. Next up, we go back to Marcus Arswald from WXOW News 19. Marcus will have a question for Mr. Gunderson. Marcus, over to you.
So if this pandemic persists through the winter and it gets colder, what recommendations and legislation will you push for if elected to help prevent an increase in homelessness?
Well, the homelessness question is being addressed in many interesting ways. I know that La Crosse County has actually secured hotel space for homeless folks this winter up on the north side of La Crosse. I think that the funding for homeless is something that we can't neglect. We must keep up on it, but we have to give people the dignity of a paycheck. We have to get people the ability to get to work. We can't expect homelessness to end if we keep people locked out of jobs, if we keep restricting the ability to get our country back on our feet, starting with our smallest and most vulnerable positions, the restaurants, the taverns, the gyms. We're losing these jobs and many of them won't come back. And it's a frightful thing. And I think that we have to realize that the first mandate was done with information that many more deaths would be occurring. We have to realize that there's a balance and we have to get people back to work.
Thank you, Mr. Gunderson. Representative Billings, 45 seconds.
Last session, we had a homelessness package that unfortunately didn't have enough traction to pass. I think the COVID pandemic highlights a lot of issues that we have that have been unaddressed, and homelessness is one. People aren't able to get jobs and look for jobs and be ready for job interviews if they don't have a secure, safe place to live. So I think we have to fund organizations. I know that the governor included more funding to Cooley Cap, who is doing work with the homeless population, really good work. The city's been doing good work with our homeless population. But now it really highlights that we've got to invest more there to get people in a safe, secure spot so they can get job training, do interviews, and get back on track.
Thank you, Representative Billings. Next, we have a question for Representative Billings from Bob Heiss of the La Crosse Tribune. Bob, over to you.
I'm here from Kenosha, and over there in Kenosha and in the region in eastern Wisconsin, there's a recall effort of Governor Evers for his the state's response to the Kenosha unrest. Since I got here, I'm answering a lot of questions from people who asked me about Kenosha, but it did take the state a day and a half to get the kind of National Guard enforcement there. And of course, we had looting and burning and that kind of thing. Are you familiar with the state's response, and what would you say about this response, given that this could happen in another community?
I am familiar with the response. My good friend and colleague, Todd Onstead, is one of the legislators in Kenosha. I've been in touch with him. Tip McGuire's the other one who's been there for a shorter period of time, but is a really good legislator. So I've heard firsthand about how things were going there. I've watched through the news. I know that local elected officials say that the governor answered their requests for what they needed. And so clearly what happened there was wrong. That's never the answer. Violence and looting is never the answer. I do support peaceful protest and people assembling peacefully and expressing opinion. But my heart goes out to businesses and people in Kenosha who are really doing some self-evaluation now and figuring out what went wrong and how they can change that going forward.
Thank you, Representative Billings. Mr. Gunderson.
Yeah, it's well known what went wrong. What went wrong was they lost control of a city because there were orders to not put in a force that was able to control an out of control crowd. Now, certainly peaceful protesters are welcome and required for our democracy. But when it's merging from peaceful protest into, and it's cover for pure protest agitators and people that are willing to take lives, garnish weapons, it was out of control, and the state had an obligation to control that. It took 4 days before they fulfilled that obligation by bringing in troops that could secure the streets at night. And it's really just a breakdown of government at the state level.
Thank you, Mr. Gunderson. Next, we go to Brad Williams of WIZM with a question for Mr. Gunderson. Brad, go ahead.
Staying in the area of law enforcement and especially in the court system, is there a particular change you would like to see made in how the courts are managed in Wisconsin, and also how people are either kept in the jails, or should there be any changes in how they are released after they've been charged with a crime?
Well, Brad, thank you for that question. I think catch and release is the most frustrating thing that our law enforcement officials can deal with. I think that they have a well-known list of frequent flyers that they will arrest and that they will constantly be removing from the streets, only to have them return to the streets just within hours. I think that we see some movement on that. I think there's been a lot of harsh conversations between the law enforcement and the judges in town. And I think that they're finally getting the message that we have to really take a look at who's doing the worst of the crimes and keep those people off the streets. I think there has to be a way through community policing to create some sort of middle ground between the police and the community. And it's a scary thing when people in my neighborhoods are saying to me, look, we're frightened at night. We're frightened that if we do call police, that it could draw an incident to our block. And that's really unfortunate. It's a tough question. And I think that the police are very well trained. We have to give them all the training they need and all the resources that they need. And that's the answer.
Thank you, Mr. Gunderson. Representative Billings.
Yeah, this is a question that we could really talk about for 2 hours. But I have 45 seconds, so I'm going to touch on some positive things I think we're doing in La Crosse from my years on the county board going forward. And that is, I think we've got a strong problem-solving court situation here in La Crosse County. I know on the state, we've expanded that to more counties with the heroin and opioid task force. So I think it's 47 counties now have problem-solving courts. We know it's a better way of getting people back on the right track. Also education and programming in the jail. I was on a study committee looking at recidivism and reentry into prison and jail. And I think some of the work that we're doing, educating people when they're in jail and doing programming so that by the time they get out, they've got a better start being back in the community. I think we're doing good things on that in La Crosse County too.
Thank you, Representative Billings. I will now read a question submitted by the League of Women Voters of the La Crosse area. The question is this: the majority of voters in Wisconsin favor a fair method of redistricting, about 70%. 54 counties have passed a resolution and 17 have passed a referendum supporting fair maps, and 11 counties have a referendum on the November ballot. With this overwhelming support, have you signed or will you sign the following Fair Maps pledge? It says, quote, "As a candidate for the Wisconsin State Assembly, I support an independent process to draw legislative district maps. I pledge to support fair maps legislation to ban gerrymandering in Wisconsin and will refuse to vote for any gerrymandering scheme. If elected, I will fight to ensure the next redistricting process results in fair maps for the next decade." Do you or would you support that pledge? Representative Billings, 1 minute and 15 seconds to you.
I think that this is one of the most important things for us to tackle right now to secure our democracy. I've been there during redistricting after the 2010 census on the county board, and I saw how it can be done fairly and well. And I've been there in the legislation, or in the legislature after the census, and saw how it can be done in a terrible way. And I encourage anybody to watch the movie Slay the Dragon, and you can see how things were done in Wisconsin, and it wasn't fair and it wasn't democratic. So I think I've already signed that pledge. I'm full in support of fair maps. I know we can find a system that works better than the way we're doing it now, when legislators are gerrymandering the state and picking their voters depending on what's going to benefit them. Over in Kenosha, there's an assembly district that looks like a Nike swoosh. Ron Kine's district looks like a Y. So why does that exist? It's all about packing and cracking, putting voters into districts and spreading them out in other districts. And we need to do better in Wisconsin.
Thank you, Representative Billings. Mr. Gunderson.
Yes, this effort began some time ago in anticipation of the census and the new district maps that would undoubtedly be drawn and undoubtedly end up in the court system. It's unfortunate. It's a long-term issue and problem. It's very difficult to know what the proper way to go, to how to find a bipartisan group. I did try on the county board with Maureen Friedland to offer, our encouragement to the state legislature to do something on a bipartisan basis. And I think that we can find a solution. It's something that is a long-time problem, and it almost invariably will end up in courts, but we will find a way to draw maps fairly. We can do it if we put our minds to it.
Thank you, Mr. Gunderson. I'm now going to go to Isabella Hulsizer of WKBT News 8 Now for a question for Mr. Gunderson. Isabella, over to you.
Thank you, Anthony. The latest unemployment rate for the 95th district was around 5% in August. So there are still constituents looking for work. What would you do if you were in office to help increase job opportunities?
Well, thank you, Isabella. I think that first and foremost, relax restrictions on what we've done with just sort of random percentages of businesses. If 25% of your allowed constituents are allowed into your business, you can barely pay just the basic costs of running a business. So I think that people understand who's doing it right and who's not as far as running safe operations, and that word gets out. It shouldn't be a condition where the county is shaming different businesses in town because they've heard of someone who received COVID. That's a horrible scarlet letter approach, and not one that I think government deserves to be in place of. I think that really the answer is spread things out, keep a safe distance from people, continue with the mantra of wash hands and wear masks in public spaces, and let's move forward. Let's keep people in business and offer support to the business so they can keep their employees working. We'll keep people off the unemployment rolls. I think we're making a comeback now, but we were down around 3% earlier in this year. So I think that we can make our way back that direction, and we just have to be safe about it.
Thank you, Mr. Gunderson. Representative Billings.
I think one thing for us to keep in mind is that the governor's his order for 25% in businesses only lasts until November 6th. So for long-term effects, clearly that's not going to really change our unemployment levels. I have had really good experience on the Department of Workforce Development, working with people on both sides of the aisle, working on things like creating apprenticeships, looking at job training for people early on in this decade. And those things worked for manufacturers who needed employees but weren't able to get the employees they needed. A lot of that work was done through our really wonderful technical college system in Wisconsin. And so I think as we go through this COVID thing, I think we need to be gathering in Madison and looking at some of those initiatives and doing more.
Thank you, Representative Billings. Next, we have a question for Representative Billings from Marcus Arsvold of WXOW News 19. Marcus, over to you.
On the topic of jobs, in your position, if elected, do you value and think fresh eyes on the subject is more important or experience?
Will you say that again? I'm sorry, Marcus, you kind of cut out.
When you guys are working with employment and increasing jobs throughout COVID, do you think fresh eyes on the 95th District Assembly spot is more important or experience, and why?
Well, I think that the experience that I've had in Madison holds me in good stead in this situation. As I said before, I have experience on the Workforce Development Committee where we've done really good work, and it's been proven work at making sure that our industries that have issues are fed the workers that they need, that the workers get the training they need. I've had legislation, I've authored legislation again with John Nygren on trying to get people who have finished a chunk of college but have maybe a year or a little more left to do. And we have a grants proposal for those students so that they can go back, get the education that they need so they can attain the jobs that they really want. So I think that we need to fuel our educational systems, fuel our technical college system, and talk to our industries and our job creators, our employers, and see what they need, and then attach that together. And I think we've done that successfully in the past, and we're going to do that successfully coming out of COVID.
Thank you, Representative Billings. Mr. Gunderson.
We were told that the lockdown would last just a matter of weeks. And that didn't turn out to be the way the governor saw it. After one lockdown to another mandate, this is transparently looking more and more like it's, by dating it to the 6th, doesn't that seem like too much of a coincidence that they're putting it right to the election date? This is looking very political by our governor. And you talk to businesses, people that don't know how they're going to make it from month to month. There are businesses that have quit and will never come back because of the actions of our governor.
Thank you, Mr. Gunderson. Next, we have a question for Mr. Gunderson from Bob Heiss of the La Crosse Tribune. Bob, over to you.
I'm interested in your views on education right now, virtual or in person. The largest unions, teachers unions in the state, are all saying virtual. And of course, Kenosha is the only one that went to virtual and in person. But I wonder generally, this is going to go on for a while and La Crosse is virtual. I mean, what are your views about education and how we should either push for in person or should we be happy with the way it's going virtually?
Well, Bob, that's an excellent question because I think the hardest thing is to understand who will be affected most by this disease and how can we avoid super spreader events. And I think that the data and the science is starting to arrive we know from Brown University, a September 23rd study from the Annenberg School of Education Policy, they have found just recently that there haven't been the super spreader events in the in-person education situations. They've tested 1,800 students in 500 different classrooms. They've got a rate of about 1 in 1,000 infections for the children in the school systems, and 2 in 1,000 for teachers. This is very, very low, and it was unexpected. And so I think that the data is still coming in. We have to follow the science. We have to follow the data, but we have to be open to it. I think that the decision to go virtual probably made sense at the time, but I think we can't get stuck in a virtual world. We're losing 75% of our students. They're falling below levels that are acceptable. They aren't going to pass grade knowledge. We have to do something differently. And that's other unintended consequences I'll get into later. My time is up.
Thank you, Mr. Gunderson. Representative Billings.
I have to do a quick go back to the governor's 25% mandate. There's no conspiracy there. I just want to clarify that he went to November 6th because that was 2 incubation cycles with the virus. And that's what he was looking at, tamping down to keep our numbers under control and our healthcare systems able to function. Back to education, we all want in-person, face-to-face. We know it's best for the kids. We know that's what the teachers would love to be doing. And schools are in a terrible, difficult situation. God bless those school board members and superintendents that are making these difficult decisions. But I think they're doing the right thing, watching the numbers. And as numbers go down, we can open our schools. That's why we have to be careful to wear masks and follow all the guidance so that our schools can open and our kids can do in person.
Thank you, Representative Billings. Next, we have a question for Representative Billings from Brad Williams of WIZM Radio. Brad, take it away.
Representative Billings does have a good deal of activity in the tourism area statewide, and we know that La Crosse County is one of the top 10 counties in Wisconsin for tourism, which has taken an enormous hit the last few months statewide. What ought to be done to help maintain the revenue and the economy of tourism once we get beyond the pandemic and try to establish things once again for our tourism industry?
Yes, as the ranking member of tourism, clearly I've been following this, and this is something that I think our tourism department has been working hard on with our local Convention and Visitors Bureau. AJ Frowls and his staff here has been doing a really good job. The gift that we have is that we have beautiful outdoor areas, right? So people who were inclined to travel were more inclined to travel where they could be outside with our river, with our bluffs. That just fit our bill, our beautiful hiking, kayaking, silent sports. So we worked hard to make a transition and encourage people to come because of those reasons. The tourism department has done a lot to highlight and put extra money into marketing that. There's been extra grants for businesses so they can make sure that they have the elements that they need, whether it's plexiglass or PPE for staff, to make sure that people felt like they could come comfortably and safely come to our businesses. I was talking to businesses early on when we were still shut down, saying what you should be doing right now is making your business safe for the future. And so many of our businesses did.
Thank you, Mr. Gunderson.
Well, I think that the hardest hit are our hotel businesses, our restaurant businesses, and these are people directly affected by overbearing government regulation. The unintended consequence is people are losing their life savings, they're losing their businesses, they won't be coming back. We need to just realize that we can do this. We have to get out of this fear mentality that we have to shut things down. We have to open things up and be safe about our distance, and we can work through this going forward. I'll repeat that over and over. I'm sounding like a broken record, but you know, for people that are working on commissions at the state government level, they're not feeling the pinch of not being able to pay the electric bill. They're not feeling the pinch of having to fire employees and wondering how they're going to pay their mortgages. And this is something we have to open up now.
Thank you, Mr. Gunderson. Next, we have a question for Mr. Gunderson from Isabella Hulsizer of WKBT News 8 Now. Isabella, take it away.
Thank you, Anthony. The spread of misinformation has been an issue throughout the pandemic. What are you doing to combat the spread of misinformation and to keep your constituents informed?
Well, the misinformation is a difficult issue because everyone has their own sources of information, but the most important thing to do is check sources. I go back to the Johns Hopkins for data on COVID. I go find where these studies are done, and then you can look deeper into the studies to find out what their methodology is. So it's really important to check that. Aside from that, there's a fair amount of knowledge that we're lagging behind. We're just finding out something. This is a brand new virus. It's 8 months into this, and we're finding out information that maybe it doesn't spread as much. Maybe it isn't much more deadly than a bad flu year. Now, it certainly is to our older residents. It certainly is to people with pre-existing conditions. I think that we should take a slant on more separation of different decades of age and keep grandparents on Zoom, not your teachers. I think that's an important distinction.
Thank you, Mr. Gunderson. Representative Billings.
I sat on the county board on the Health and Human Services Committee, so that was sitting on the Board of Health. And we received really good training from Doug Mormon and local staff on pandemics. So when the pandemic hit, I took it seriously. Unfortunately, I couldn't say the same about our leadership on the national level. In fact, the New England Journal of Medicine just came out with an opinion piece that said that they've taken a crisis and turned it into a tragedy. And so what I did all along and continue to do as a representative is get out information that is good, that is science-based, to try to get good information to my constituents in this part of the state.
Thank you, Representative Billings. Next, we have a question for Representative Billings from Marcus Arsvald of WXOW News 19. Marcus, take it away.
Thanks, Anthony. So from community members that are your constituents who say that they don't feel protected by the police in our community, what are you doing to work with the police and the community to make sure that that changes?
I've been in touch with our chief from when the moment that the COVID hit, and I've been in touch with law enforcement often during my tenure as a representative. In fact, my second bill came from law enforcement that I passed in the assembly, and the personnel who was there said, "I can't believe we actually made a change." I have good conversation that way. Also, I've been in touch a lot virtually, listening to people in our community, whether it's through the Franciscan Sisters or the university has done some really good listening opportunities, just to hear from people who say that they don't feel like they're safe from law enforcement, because I will tell you, my experience is not the same. I have had good experience with the law enforcement, and I appreciate law enforcement and think it's positive when I see law enforcement drive by my street. So I think going forward, the important thing we need to do is listen and take that into account as we look toward legislation going forward.
Thank you, Representative Billings. Mr. Gunderson.
The governor of the state of Wisconsin has had mandates declared unlawful by the Supreme Court of Wisconsin. He broke the law. If we have the top person in the state flaunting the law, how can we, as that example, not expect it to happen throughout the residents of the state? I think that there really has to be more accountability at the governor's level to communicate with the legislature and to find out how we can support the law officers. We had a roundtable discussion with sheriffs from 7 counties around the area, and they are ready. They know how to handle this. They have the equipment. They have the training. They need our support, and we can't allow lawlessness starting at the top to go on.
Thank you, Mr. Gunderson. Next, we have a question for Mr. Gunderson from Bob Heiss of the La Crosse Tribune. Bob, take it away.
Governor Evers has called, I think it was 2 special sessions, maybe 3, that were dead on arrival from the Republican side. And clearly, the only reason I think he's calling special sessions is to get something addressed that isn't being done in session. What can you tell me about the future of, are special sessions needed, or how can the legislature really get some real things done when they're not meeting, addressing them in a regular session?
Well, Bob, a special session as a knee-jerk reaction is a bad reaction. I think that that it's a longer-term fix, and I think that by creating a commission, as our legislature has intended, in a bipartisan commission, and really looking into the serious, where is this coming from and how do we stop it? That is what's important. I think on the issue of police and law enforcement, it's important to know that these people, 99.9%, have the best intentions and have fantastic training. Wisconsin has some of the best training of any state in the entire country. So we see things going on in Wauwatosa or Kenosha where people are being imported and put into the mix to cause trouble. And it's extremely frustrating. It's very difficult when you call a law enforcement officer to come and respond to a problem in your community, and instantly it turns into a riot situation. And maybe it takes a day or two, but it doesn't take long in this age. So we have to support the law enforcement. We have to form a commission to figure out a way to keep them well funded.
Thank you, Mr. Gunderson. Representative Billings.
There are a place for special sessions. I remember, I think 4 years ago, maybe 6, when I was in the state assembly working on the heroin and opioid task force under Governor Walker. He called a special session for us to address that epidemic that we were dealing with in Wisconsin. We had 14 pieces of legislation that we brought forth. We had good debate on the floor, and it was bipartisan. And John Nygren and I got that legislation through, and that felt really good. So it's been opportunities lost, I think, when the governor has tried to call us in a special session and we've been gavelled in and out. I know there's a lot of drama that goes on up here. I came in right after Act 10, so I saw that. But what I do is just keep my eyes on the prize, and I just keep working and working.
Thank you, Representative Billings. Next, we have a question for Representative Billings from Brad Williams of WIZM Radio. Brad, over to you.
Coming back to education, higher education, certainly a concern in the La Crosse area. And for the last several years, we have had tuition freezes in the UW system. Do you expect that is going to continue indefinitely, or is the legislature going to figure out different ways to bring the debt down, bring the cost down of attending a college?
It's hard to predict, but I would think that right now, during this time of COVID, that there will be a feeling that it is appropriate to freeze tuition again, to give that relief to Wisconsin families and Wisconsin students from rising costs of tuition. The university did take a hit with when the governor said we need to start reining in our budget. And I have a concern about that, because I've always been on colleges and university committees since I've got elected, because I've got University of Wisconsin La Crosse, Viterbo, and Western in my district. So I've always wanted to be on that committee and be a voice for La Crosse. I'm also the chair of our higher ed subcommittee of the State Building Commission. So very involved in building projects on campuses and toured campuses, probably more than any other legislator at this point, and talked to chancellors, staff, and students. So I'm a fan of funding our higher education system. We've had a really quality education system, and that's fueled, it's an economic engine that fuels Wisconsin and creates our future workforce.
Thank you, Representative Billings. Mr. Gunderson.
One byproduct of this very unusual year is that we've learned there are ways to do things in very economical ways using technology. I think that education using technology has certain places and it has certain advantages. And I think that there will be sort of a reboot and a re-acknowledgement of how we can best make use of this. I think it's critical, though, that we don't overlook maintenance. Too often, we lose track of keeping up our facilities and our infrastructure. We have to continue to maintain our infrastructure so things don't fall apart as we're away from buildings. We have to use our facilities to the best of their lifespan and find new ways to save money and to cut costs in the education process. Hey, I'm done.
Thank you, Mr. Gunderson. And thank you to all of our media partners for their questions today. We're now going to transition to closing statements by the candidates. Each candidate will have 1 minute for their closing statement. Representative Billings, you will go first. You have 1 minute for your closing statement.
Thank you. Every 2 years, the people of the 95th Assembly District have a choice to make. They get to decide if they want me to be their state representative or not. And every 2 years I get a choice and I get to decide if I want to run for office again. This time that choice was easy. I've had a really productive past several sessions. And I think that shows by the recognition that I've received by several groups around the Capitol, including Wisconsin Economic Development Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, Public Health, Conservation Voters and Scenic Wisconsin, and even Wisconsin Family Physicians. So I am excited about going back to work for the people that I represent. I represent a great district, and I think I'm doing good work for them. And I've got a lot of things that I still want to accomplish, and I hope they vote for me so I can do that.
Thank you, Representative Billings. Mr. Gunderson, you have 1 minute for your closing statement.
Thank you, Anthony, and thank everyone on the panel for this opportunity today. It's been a wonderful experience to take this step forward from just a lowly county board supervisor and area activist and area builder to look at things in the bigger picture of the state of Wisconsin. I think that we have a marvelous future ahead of us. We've got a lot of things that we will need to clean up and work toward, budgetary restraints and things that are going to need some serious work and different ideas. And I think that I can offer those new ideas. I can offer a fresh start for the people in the community. I'm not so tied to the Madison workings as someone who's been there for 5 terms. We don't have term limits in the state of Wisconsin, but what we do have is elections every 2 years. So I'm asking for your vote to look into the possibility of different and new ideas to face what's coming up. Please vote for me this 3rd of November. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gunderson. This concludes our debate for the 95th District in the Wisconsin State Assembly. Thank you to the members of our media panel from WIZM Radio, the La Crosse Tribune, WXOW News 19, and WKBT News 8 Now. And of course, thank you to the candidates for their participation in this debate. For more information about voting in this election, please visit myvote.wi.gov. For now, I'm Anthony Chergosky from the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. Thank you for joining us for this debate, and remember to cast your vote.
Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139. Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.